Here's a story about a love triangle, drugs, booze, and all the strings that come with being famous. And a story about redemption, so they say. Johnny Cash was raised in a Christian home. As a young boy, Johnny Cash was taught the importance of family, the reverence of the earth, and the piety of God. Cash often talked about his religious background and its importance in his life. But was the Man in Black really a good husband and father and a God-fearing man, as we've been told? Maybe not. Johnny Cash served in the U.S. Air Force and married his sweetheart Vivian Liberto in 1954. They had met at a roller skating rink in Texas, and he wooed her, exchanging love letters for 3 years while Cash was in Europe serving his country. Their relationship started out filled with love letters, romance, and eventually heartbreak. They had 4 children together, all girls. Cash would move to Memphis and work as a door-to-door salesman to care for his family. One day, he was invited to sing for Sam Phillips at Sun Records. Vivian said it was the 1 hour that would change everything. Soon, Cash was on the road, promoting his music, singing and playing guitar, recording songs, and making a name for himself. Vivian stayed home, raising 4 children, while Cash was only home for a day or week at a time, before leaving for months again. The Johnny Cash Vivian had married and fallen in love with was fading away. In her book, I Walk the Line, My Life with Johnny Cash, released in 2007, Vivian Liberto was able to tell her side of the story. Liberto came from a strict Italian family, a family that was also devout followers of the Catholic Church. In the 1960s, Vivian started noticing a change in her husband. As she says in her book, there were 2 things she was battling against to save her marriage: drugs and June Carter. As Cash was climbing up the charts in country music, she watched as he began drinking alcohol, eventually getting hooked on amphetamines. Johnny would move the family to California, giving Vivian hope that a new home and location might help to bring him home more often and help stabilize their family. But although Cash would often try to kick the habit of popping pills and drinking alcohol, there was one thing Johnny just couldn't shake: women. Apparently, he had access to lots and lots of women, one in particular. Unlike the movie I Walk the Line, which paints Vivian as the villain and Johnny as the aggressive pursuer, she mentioned in her book it was actually June Carter who was chasing Johnny Cash. During one backstage confrontation, June Carter brazenly told her, "Vivian, he will be mine." June Carter was considered country royalty, and Cash was touring in the 1960s, often with the Carter family. Vivian worried about what may happen on the road, as Cash appeared to be less interested in his first love. She asked him about the relationship with Carter, and Johnny replied, "I walk the line," meaning he was being faithful to his wife of almost 10 years. However, he was lying. Vivian wrote that she knew in her heart, "This woman was a danger to my family." Cash was falling for June. Truth is, Cash and Carter had been having a hot love affair for over a year, while both were still married to others. With a home full of children to care for, Vivian could only hope and pray that her husband would have a change of heart and walk the line. But she mentioned more than once that aside from drugs, Cash was an adulterer with multiple women, and it was threatening their marriage. In 1965, Cash would be arrested in El Paso for possession, having hidden almost 1,500 pills in his guitar case. To make matters more complicated, a photograph of Cash appearing with his wife coming out of the Texas courthouse appeared in newspapers around the country. And although Vivian was of Sicilian descent, due to her complexion and dark hair, there was talk about theirs being an interracial marriage. Organizations with connections to the Ku Klux Klan made statements about Johnny Cash's marriage, and fallout ensued throughout the country. Concerts were being canceled as a result of the arrest and photograph. There were protests at shows and even death threats made against Johnny and Vivian. In the book The Man Who Carried Cash by Julie Chadwick, she shares stories about how bad Cash's addiction to pills had become. Fistfights, car accidents, missed concerts, unable to stay awake in meetings or interviews. And according to Chadwick, at one point he was taking 100 pills a day washed down with a case of beer. She adds, "There's this one incident after a show at the Hollywood Bowl, which Johnny Western describes. Vivian was waiting in the parking lot after the show to see Johnny. and he just breezed past and said hi to her and his girls and then went to his car, and June got in, and they took off. Vivian was left there, devastated. Later that year, after Vivian filed for divorce, she was written out of the history of the country music star's life. The song I Walk the Line, as well as Ring of Fire, written by the Carter sisters, detailed in part the affairs in the story. Eventually, Cash would marry June Carter in 1968, but she would also soon have her problems with drugs and alcohol, always worried that her husband would be unfaithful to her as well. Her worst nightmare came true when she discovered that not only was Johnny Cash straying from his second marriage, but June discovered his lover to be her sister, Anita Carter. Their torrid affair would last for a year, resulting in her getting pregnant, and a cover-up would soon follow. The affair and love child were kept a secret, in part by June, until 2003, when someone close to the family finally broke the news. During their life together, Cash went through multiple admissions into rehab treatment facilities. Later in life, he shared about how a relationship with a higher power had been instrumental in that recovery. Those who knew him said he often liked to tell people, "You can be redeemed." But they felt suspicious about his sentiment, thinking it was most likely a PR stunt. Was it really true that he was a changed man? But for this country music superstar who was redeemed, there was a final blow for his first family of 4 girls. At the time of his death in 2003, Cash was worth an estimated $100 million. Most of that money went to his son, who he had with June Carter, John Carter Cash. Johnny Cash left each of his 4 daughters just around 1% each of his wealth and no royalties of any of his catalog of music whatsoever. Regardless of how much you may enjoy an artist's music or their public persona, they all have kinks in their armor and are human just like anyone else. They always say you should never meet your heroes. I guess it's important for us to remember that it's buyer beware when it comes to putting any superstar on that pedestal. Vivian Cash wrote the book I Walk the Line, My Life with Johnny before passing away in 2005. The book reveals the joys and heartbreak associated with her being Johnny Cash's first wife. The book is comprised of many of the love letters exchanged between the two before getting married. The Johnny Cash before the music, the drugs, and alcohol, and before June. She was always proud that she raised the 4 girls as best as she did, and she kept her dignity throughout her life. Where Johnny Cash did not, Vivian walked the line.